I just went into the kitchen and looked in the cheese drawer and I brought out a small sampling of cheese. I'll bet you have some sampling of cheese that looks this ostentatious. I'll bet you have more cheese than you need. I know that we now eat more cheese than we need. I think the reason we do so is because of America's tax and fiscal policies from the 70s and 80s. And I'm gonna make that argument today on Weekly Dad News. Let's go. So today's episode is based on a conversation that you and I were having, Dad, about how taxes are different for you now. And I want to walk through a weird story about taxes and how taxes are spent. And then I have a proposal on why you are looking at taxes differently now than you were before. So to start this off, this is the cheese that I had in my kitchen drawer. There's more cheese in there. I have provolone, and I have a Parmesan. There's a cotija, part skim mozzarella. Here's sticks, cheese sticks. I'm not eating these. I don't know why I have those. More Parmesan, and then some like deli meat, American cheese kind of stuff. This one though, this one's interesting. This is Italian 4-cheese blend. So it has part skim mozzarella, smoke flavored provolone, Romano, Parmesan, Fontino, and Asiago. So it has a whole bunch of different cheeses all in one bag. Why? Why do I have so much cheese? I think I know why. And let's talk about the 1970s. So we had an oil crisis in the 1970s where fuel was extraordinarily expensive. And a side effect of that oil crisis was the cost of dairy goods went all over the place. They weren't able to supply enough. They weren't able to move them. When they did, it was too expensive. So our dairy market got discombobulated. They looked at it and said, we need to help the dairy industry stabilize through this fuel and oil crisis. So Carter put together, Jimmy Carter, the president at the time, he had new subsidies. So these are a way that the government's going to spend money. He goes, we have a way to spend money to help stabilize this industry. They chose the dairy industry to do so. Part of that is that the relationship that people have with their milkman is like that of the postman. People get fresh milk all the time in the 1970s. And in the 60s and 50s, it's the classic, the milkman's coming by, puts your milk jugs, takes the empties. And so because it's such this iconic thing and very visible to everybody, they went, we need to fix this. We need to fix the milk industry, the dairy industry. And what they did is they spent $2 billion over 4 years, so about $500 million a year, which is a huge sum back then. It's a huge sum now. I mean, that would be great. There's many industries you can help a lot with $2 billion. So production booms. It works really, really well. The dairy industry is doing so well because the government has basically said, any excess you make, we will buy that excess, and we're gonna stabilize other parts and make it work. So we have this milk that we're buying from dairy farmers that they can't sell or is excess. So they're producing as much as they possibly can, just rip-roaring, setting it up. Let's go, let's go, let's go, milk, 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 milk. You can't store milk for very long. You can store cheese for a very long time. Most cheeses you need to ripen. So the excess dairy that the government's buying in the early 80s is being turned into cheese. Processed into cheese and being stored in limestone caves beneath Springfield, Missouri. And there are these giant underground limestone caves where the temperature is 36 degrees, the humidity is controlled, and we're storing tons and tons and tons of cheese down there. We end up with so much cheese, over 15,000 tons of cheese, so 30 million pounds of cheese in this hole in the ground in Springfield, Missouri. What do we do with that much cheese that we have bought with the taxpayer's dollar and put into a cave to help the dairy industry? So at this point, Reagan's in office, it's 81-ish, and he goes, you know what? I don't want to have this cheese sitting there, maybe going bad, because it has been there, some of it for years. Let's start getting rid of it. Let's start giving it away to people that need it. And so they put together a program called the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program. And what they did is they took that cheese and they gave it to the elderly, they gave it to the needy, they gave it to people and families and food banks who needed additional assistance. So we had used it to solve two problems now. One, we stabilized the dairy industry, and two, we have this food that's going to families that need it. So in the early 80s, there's this split in perception of the cheese. If you were a parent in that time, and there's a miner who has a quote on this and talked about receiving the cheese, it feels uncomfortable. It feels like you can't do it. It becomes this kind of mark of shame. If you're a kid during this time, you go, yeah, cheese. So you have these two totally different takes on getting that government cheese. Once we start handing out all of that cheese, and this is important, the two views are important. Once we start handing out all of this cheese and just giving it away to everybody, here's more cheese, everybody, yay. Once we start doing that and giving all this cheese away, we don't quite get through all of it. So okay, how can we get more of this cheese in more consumer goods? So they put together the US Department of Agriculture through the Dairy Promotion and Research Board, which is part of them. They go, here, what do we do with this dairy? They create a company called Dairy Management Incorporated, and its whole goal is to make you eat more cheese. That's it. And they have some great successes. They're the reason we have stuffed crust pizza. They are the reason we had the quesalupa. They are behind the Got Milk campaign where everybody had a little Milk Hitler mustache, right? So they get more cheese and more things, and we're eating more cheese and we're having more cheese, and we've got all these different cheeses. The 4-cheese blend, 4-cheese pizza, this Italian blend, these are ways to get rid of extra milk. So kids that are born in the 80s and raised in the 80s are exposed to all of these advertisements and all of this stuff. The weird thing is the milk consumption doesn't increase, but cheese consumption does, to the point where we're now eating more cheese than we ever have before, and less dairy. We were eating about 21 pounds of cheese per person per year in 1980. Now, we eat over 40 pounds of cheese per person per year. We've more than doubled the amount of cheese that we consume. And all that cheese, just cheese. At the same time, milk consumption goes way down. So now milk is being used more to produce milk products, yogurts, cheeses. There's even highly processed milk now where they take the lactose out of it so that people that are lactose intolerant can have milk. So all of this happens. And this group that does it, the Dairy Management Incorporated. So Dairy Management Incorporated was developed by the US Department of Agriculture. And it's there, and it's like a reverse lobby, right? And we have all kinds of these now. There's groups that want you to eat more beef, and there's groups that want you to drink more water, and orange juice producers, right? So there's these groups that push for a specific sector or segment and try and get you to consume more. Because it doesn't really matter to the actual producers, the farmers that are making it, as much as it does to the people that are buying it from them and then selling it to you as a reprocess. So think of that cultural effect as kind of a reverse lobbying effect, where instead of a lobbying group for, say, the National Realtors Association lobbying the government and saying, hey, government, we want these laws to be this way, it's a government-created entity that's actually lobbying you to consume more of this thing because the government has a kind of a thumb on that part of the scale, the industry. So think about how this story makes you feel, right? So this is weird, right? Like, I get the bailout, that's cool. And I get giving the cheese away, that's also cool. But then it goes a little bit further and goes, hey, everybody eat more cheese. And we do. There's a cultural shift in the amount of cheese we eat, where we double the amount of cheese we eat. That's crazy. A support policy for a specific sector of the economy turned into a social behavior that affects everybody in the United States. So this is how tax policy kind of works. They talk about Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid being the third rail of tax policy because you're not supposed to touch it. We have a budget of about $6 trillion a year, and we take in about $4.4 trillion a year from taxes. Those taxes come from income tax, Social Security tax, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, excise duties, import tariffs. We have all these different ways we can generate a little bit of money. But as we do those, we're picking winners and losers in the economy. And the way that we pay those taxes is very different. It's very different when somebody passes and you have to pay your inheritance tax, or if somebody gives you money to help buy a house and you pay a gift tax, or if you just have a normal W-2 job. And Dad, I think that's where you're seeing something different. Because if you think about it, when you are working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or whatever your job structure is, you're 40 hours a week, you're 30 hours a week, you're 70 hours a week, and you're on payroll, you know what your paycheck's gonna be post all of your deductions. You go, cool, taxes come out, insurance comes out, Social Security comes out, anything else I have in there that I bought, dental comes out. So all those things are done, and you know what's coming in, what the budget is. And that's a normal W-2 job. That's what most people have, and that's how most people get paid. But we're in this space now where more and more people are taking on side gigs, things that will give them what's called 1099 income, which means they haven't paid taxes on it yet. And they have to figure out how to pay those taxes. There's also a point in life when you start getting Social Security disbursements or pension disbursements. And when you get those and they're shifting and your investment accounts go, you're 65, take this money, your taxes change. And there's not one cohesive thing that says, hey, here's what all this has to do and here's what you're gonna pay this year. It depends on what your income is and it changes each year. And that's what you're hitting into. This is the same thing as people who get a bonus at work. They go, yay, I got a $1,000 bonus. Then they get the check and it's taxed at a super high rate. And it's taxed at a high rate because the government looks at that bonus as a possible shift into another bracket. So they want to tax it to make sure that at the end of the year, correct taxes have been paid. So that perceptual split is, I think, part of why people look at the stuff like the cheese in the caves and go, hey, why am I paying for that? Why am I spending money on that? But the farmers who get the assistance go, thank God for that. It stabilized its entire portion. The people that got the cheese to eat, the elderly and the people at the food banks, that closed the gap between a tighter belt loop and making it through the week. I got to eat as well as my kids. Being on different sides of it and thinking about it in different ways means that as we decide and figure out tax policy, we're trying to balance the needs of everybody in the economy against each other, but not in a combat way, in a supportive way. We're going, cool, as an economy, what are the things that we want to happen? How do we want those to behave? And so you've got people like, again, this guy who pays no taxes because that's a parsonage. And then you've got the people who are making $70,000, $80,000 a year and they're paying 20 to 30% of their income on taxes. And maybe more if they're in New York or California and have to pay state and local taxes. Because there's this huge stack of taxes that we pay, including sales tax. And as we pay all of these, we're funding all this stuff, but there's a disconnect between what we're buying with our dollar and what we perceive the value to be. You don't think about it much when you're driving down the roads, but when you're staring at that number as the gas tank fills, you know exactly how much of that portion is in taxes because it tells you on the thing. This includes this much for a state and highway rehabilitation traffic. That cost me an extra $2 today. And then we drive on the road and don't think about what we bought. This is also true with hospitals and police. There's all these things. One of the ones I think about the most is schools. I drive by them all the time and I'm fully aware that I don't have kids and I'm paying for schools, but I should be. Because as a group, we want our kids to be smarter. I want your kids to be smarter. Well, Dad, your kid's doing fine. But I want people's kids to be smarter. I want people to be educated. I want people to be aware. And so as we come into tax day, which, this is going up on tax day. As we come into tax day and we start thinking about it, we should pay attention to this. We should start going, cool, what are we getting? And then when we don't like the thing, we should start making noise about it. I don't like how much money we're spending on all of the drone operations in places we're not at war with. I don't like how much money we spend to give tax breaks to Elon Musk. You know? So as we start looking at all these different ways that our money is being spent, the only way we can get it to change is if people know that we don't like it. And so the way that you do that is you reach out to your senators and your House representatives and say, hey, I like this and I don't like this. We want to shift these things. Or something like that is happening right now in Clark County. We have a spot called Lone Mountain. It's gorgeous. You look out and you can see forever. All around it, there's a residential limiter where you're not allowed to be taller than 35 feet. It's a rural preservation area. But right now, the Mormon church is trying to put a temple there. And it'll be tall, super tall. So they're chasing all these exemptions. And they're getting them because the government can hear them. When we get to the point of you and me where we're just kind of sitting around, we're like, I'm here in my house and all my stuff is fine and I don't need to worry about it. I don't need more cheese. How do we tell the government the way that we want them to spend our money? And again, it's talking to your local representatives, finding out what that money is being spent on, and telling them how you feel about it. And that might help with your perception. Once you know where all this money is going, you get a better idea. You know, when we hit the spot where there are tax breaks, the more money you make, the more available tax breaks are to you. It means that we have this split in the economy where some of these tax breaks are inaccessible to people making less than $80,000 a year because they don't have enough of a tax liability to take the break. We're seeing that right now with solar. One of the things that's happening with solar is that if people don't make enough money, they're being told, hey, your solar's gonna cost 30 grand, you're gonna get 10 grand back as a third, as a rebate at the end of the year. But if they don't have a $10,000 tax liability, they won't. So at the end of the year, they're going, I thought I was gonna get 10 grand back, but they're not. So there's this perceptual difference. And that's why I think it's really important to think about how taxes work, why you're seeing them now, and where they're being spent. And that's a good way to keep them from ending up in a cave in Springfield, Missouri. Happy tax day, Dad. Go have a grilled cheese sandwich just to keep those guys in business. Weekly Dad News. I'm out.